The last words my daughter said before Christmas weren't, "I love you." They were, "Don't come to my house, Dad. You'll embarrass us." That sentence didn't just break my heart, it rearranged it. It turned warmth into ice pride, into silence and love, into something I could no longer recognize. My name is Alexander Reed, 65 years old, once the man who built a $50 million real estate empire from nothing but grit and faith. I've lost fortunes before recessions, lawsuits, market crashes, but nothing prepared me for the day my own daughter treated me like a liability instead of a father. December 15th, 2023, 3:47 p.m. I can still hear Natalie's voice, sharp, polished, rehearse the kind of tone people use when they're ashamed of where they came from. 10 words that ended 29 years of love. "Don't come to my house, Dad. You'll embarrass us." For a long second, I couldn't speak. I just stared at the phone, at her name glowing on the screen like it belonged to a stranger. Outside, snow was beginning to fall over Westchester County, coating the city in quiet white. Inside, everything in me went still. Most fathers would have yelled, begged, or argued. I didn't. I smiled. Not because I was okay, because I finally understood. You can take everything from a man, his house, his fortune, his reputation. But when you take his dignity, you create something far more dangerous, a man with nothing left to lose. That's when the story of this family drama really begins. A story about quiet revenge, moral justice, and how silence can be louder than any scream. 15 years ago, Natalie had been my pride. When she graduated college, I handed her the keys to a brand new BMW, $43,000 paid in cash. When she got into Wharton for her MBA, I wrote another check, $240,000, because I believed in her. Her wedding. The Ritz-Carlton flowers from Italy, live band, $180,000 of pure joy. Every father dreams of walking his daughter into a life he helped build. But money changes people. Or maybe success just reveals who they already are. Slowly the call stopped. The texts went unanswered. Invitations lost in the mail. Until one day she had a mansion worth $7.2 million, crystal chandeliers, imported marble, and no space left for the man who paid her way there. That's when I learned the first rule of quiet power. When people push you out of their world, don't chase them. Buy their world instead. Before this story ends, you'll see how a forgotten father became the most powerful man in his daughter's life, not through anger, not through violence, but through strategy, silence, and consequence. Because sometimes revenge isn't loud. Sometimes it's signed, notarized, and delivered by courier. This isn't just another revenge story. It's a lesson in respect and justice, a modern-day parable for everyone who's ever been underestimated. Stay till the end, because by the time you hear what happened that Christmas, you'll understand why I stopped being a father and started being a businessman. People think betrayal happens in one explosive moment, but it doesn't. It's slow, polite, and dressed like love until the day it takes off its mask. That's how it was with Natalie. My daughter didn't stop loving me overnight. She just started loving other things more, status, validation, appearances. I didn't see it at first. Maybe I didn't want to. Back then, I still believed that loyalty could survive success. I was wrong. 15 years earlier, Natalie had stood in our kitchen in her graduation gown crying because she didn't know how to thank me for everything I'd done. I handed her the keys to a brand new BMW, $43,000 bought outright with the profits from a shopping center deal. "It's just a car," I'd said, "but let it remind you that your old man believes in you." She threw her arms around me, whispering, "You're the best, Dad." At that moment, I thought I'd raised a daughter who valued effort more than image. When she got into Wharton for her MBA, I wrote another check, $240,000. No loans, no debt, no interest, just pride. It wasn't just tuition, it was belief compounded over decades. I watched her walk across that stage, her cap tilted slightly to the side, the same way her mother used to wear her hat. I remember thinking Elaine would be so proud. Then came the wedding, the Ritz-Carlton, 2019. The kind of day that makes magazines drool. The flowers came from Florence, the photographer from Los Angeles, and the honeymoon from my savings, $180,000 for a single day of perfection. But I didn't care. Seeing Natalie happy was worth more than every dollar I'd ever made. And when she and Justin, her ambitious new husband, bought their first home in Scarsdale, I wired $500,000 for the down payment. "Just a little help," I said. so you can start your life debt-free. Justin shook my hand firm and confident, the kind of handshake that hides calculation. We'll make you proud, he said. I should have listened to the small voice inside me whispering, he already thinks he's above you. Success changes people, or maybe it exposes them. The phone calls got shorter, texts turned into emojis, invitations stopped arriving. At first I told myself it was life, they were busy, successful parents now. But deep down I felt it, I was being edited out of their story. The first real crack appeared 2 years ago at Natalie's company Christmas party. She'd invited me reluctantly, I'd later realize. I put on my best clothes, my old JCPenney suit I'd worn to Elaine's funeral. The shoes had cracks at the seams, but they still shined under the lobby lights. When I walked in, Natalie's face told the truth before her lips could. That half second of hesitation, the flash of embarrassment, it was all there. She whispered something to Justin, who gave me a polite smile, the kind rich men give waiters. Dad, she said, guiding me toward the corner. Maybe next time you could, dress up a little more? Her words cut deeper than any insult. Dress up, I was the man who had built her world. I'd worn dust and concrete before she could walk, worked nights while she slept, sold everything when Elaine got sick. And now in the eyes of my daughter, I was the one who didn't fit the room. Still, I forgave her. She's under pressure, I told myself, building her career. But the truth is, people under pressure don't lie, they reveal. Last Christmas sealed it. I drove to their mansion in Harrison, a $7.2 million testament to image and marble. I had gifts for the grandchildren, Lily 5 and Ethan 3. I'd wrapped them myself, tied the ribbons twice because kids remember things like that. When Natalie opened the door, she didn't even step aside. Dad, this isn't a good time, she said, eyes darting past me. Justin's parents are here and we're having dinner with some investors. Through the glass, I could see the dining room crystal chandeliers, polished silver wine glasses catching the light. I asked, can I at least say hello to the kids? They're napping, she lied. And right then above her shoulder, I heard Lily's laugh, high, bright, unmistakable. That was the moment I realized I wasn't unwelcome, I was embarrassing. A ghost of her old life, haunting her perfect new one. But Natalie didn't know I'd kept records. Every wire, every check, every gift. A habit from my real estate days. The total, $2,739, $1,000. That's what I'd poured into her life. Not counting the time, the advice, the sacrifices, just cold hard cash. While she was polishing her image, I was paying for it. And I was about to collect. You see, when you've built an empire, once you understand leverage, you understand that power isn't loud, it's patient. It's the pause before the move. So when she told me, you don't belong in our world, I didn't argue. I let her believe it, because I already knew something she didn't. The foundation of her world was cracking. Every smile at those cocktail parties, every photo of her perfect life on Instagram, they were built on borrowed money and borrowed time. I knew it. I could feel it like a draft in an old house. And when the first gust came, when the truth about their mortgage, their debts, their overspending started to surface, I'd be ready. People talk about betrayal like it's fire, but it's not. Fire is honest. Betrayal is icy, slow, silent, and devastating. It freezes love in place, keeps you awake at night, replaying conversations you thought meant something. Natalie's betrayal didn't burn me. It froze me. And when the world gets that cold, you have two choices: break or learn how to move quietly through the ice. So I chose silence, not because I was weak, but because I was planning. And when the moment came, I'd remind my daughter of one simple truth: the only thing more powerful than money is memory. Some betrayals are loud. Others sound like love. That's the line that comes to mind every time I think about that night. The night my daughter Natalie and her husband Justin pretended to love me while cutting the last thread that still connected us. You see, fake affection is a performance, and they were professionals. They'd learned how to stage warmth, how to act like family when it benefited their reputation, and how to turn that warmth off the second the audience left. A few weeks after that cold Christmas rejection, Natalie called. Her voice was light, falsely cheerful. "Dad, how are you? I just wanted to check on you." That's the thing about manipulative people. They always sound kind right before the knife goes in. I should have known she wasn't calling to reconnect. She was calling to prepare her image. There was always an angle. A week later, I found out why. A friend of mine from the Heritage First Bank, Leonard Pierce, had mentioned seeing Justin at a charity gala boasting about his brilliant father-in-law who started from nothing. He'd laughed about how I was a relic of the old economy, but still good PR. That line hit me harder than I expected. Good PR. That's all I was, a symbol of humble beginnings they could polish when it made them look virtuous. Then came the dinner, the performance that broke the illusion once and for all. It was at their home, the $7 million mansion in Harrison, the one with Italian marble floors, and a chandelier worth more than most people's retirement. I'd been invited under the guise of family night. Natalie said, "Dad, the kids miss you. Come over. Let's have dinner together like old times." My heart believed her. My instincts didn't. But I went anyway, because that's what fathers do. We show up even when we know we're walking into disappointment. When I arrived, the air smelled like truffle oil and staged sincerity. Justin greeted me at the door, wearing that polished Wall Street grin, hand gripping mine like he was closing a deal, not welcoming family. "Alex, you look good," he said, eyes scanning my thrift store coat. He didn't mean it. His gaze wasn't admiration, it was inventory. Dinner was already in motion, investors, colleagues, wives dripping in diamonds. I realized then that this wasn't family night. It was a networking party, and I was the novelty act, the humble father, the hard-working contractor who made it big enough to pay for his daughter's dreams, a living talking point for their American success story. "Dad, sit next to me." Natalie said, her smile tight enough to crack glass. She kissed my cheek, quick, camera-ready cold. The kind of kiss that says, "Please behave." For a moment I wondered if she could still see me as the man who once carried her on his shoulders through the snow. But her eyes darted across the room, checking who was watching. Love wasn't in the room anymore, optics were. They asked me to tell stories, not for nostalgia, but for entertainment. "Tell them about the first shopping center you built, Dad." Natalie said, her voice dripping with that tone people use when they're speaking to a child or a servant. I told the story anyway because pride is a habit that's hard to kill. Halfway through, I caught Justin whispering to his friend at the table. "He still talks about pouring concrete like it's magic." The men laughed. That's when I realized I wasn't family anymore. I was a punchline. When dinner ended, Natalie walked me to the door, her hand grazing my arm, eyes soft but scripted. "Dad, thank you for coming. It means a lot." She hugged me, careful not to wrinkle her designer dress, careful to keep the performance going. Her voice dropped low enough for only me to hear. "Next time, maybe wear something more formal." "Okay, it's important to make a good impression." I nodded, silent. Not because I agreed, but because silence was my only armor left. The next day, photos from that evening appeared on social media. Natalie had tagged me in one. The caption read, "Family, the foundation of everything we build." Over 100 likes, a dozen comments. "Such a beautiful family. So much love here, you're blessed." None of them knew the truth that behind that photo was a man who'd been edited out of his own story, a father who'd paid for the table, but no longer had a seat at it. The comments didn't hurt. What hurt was that I recognized her handwriting in the caption. Those words, "foundation build," were mine. Things I used to tell her when she was a child, sitting on my workbench, watching me draw blueprints. She'd stolen even my language to decorate her lie. But here's the irony of family drama: people who fake affection always think they're in control of the narrative. They forget that the person they're deceiving might be recording the whole performance in memory, in silence, in receipts. That night I went home and pulled out an old hard drive where I'd saved recordings from business calls, voicemails, bank records. On a hunch, I replayed our recent calls. Sure enough, I'd captured the moment she and Justin humiliated me on speakerphone, mocking my clothes, my car, my lack of sophistication. The same people who hugged me for the camera had laughed about me behind that same phone. That was the night I stopped defending them. If love was a business, they defaulted. I'd invested millions, and now I wanted my return, not in dollars, but in dignity. People ask why I didn't yell, why I didn't cut them off immediately. The truth, because silence isn't weakness. Silence is calculation. You don't rush revenge. You let it ripen until it tastes like justice. By the time the dinner ended, the performance had failed. Natalie thought she'd hidden her disgust behind a smile. But disgust has a scent, and I could smell it. That night, while she posted pictures and hashtags about gratitude and family goals, I started a new folder on my laptop. I named it simply The Debt. Inside, I began collecting everything: transactions, screenshots, dates, voices, because sooner or later, they'd try to rewrite history again. And when they did, I wanted the truth ready, organized, time-stamped, undeniable. I wasn't planning revenge that night. I was preparing accountability. Because when a family uses love as camouflage, truth becomes the only weapon worth carrying. And soon they'd learn that even quiet fathers keep records. Every empire is built twice, once in the world and once inside a man's mind. The first can be taken, the second never. That thought came to me on one of those nights when the silence felt heavier than the walls. The city outside my small apartment was asleep, blanketed by December snow. The radiator hissed softly, the kind of noise you only hear when you're alone long enough to listen. My dinner sat untouched, a bowl of soup gone cold. The phone on my table was still, but in my head I could still hear her voice. "Don't come to my house, Dad. You'll embarrass us." Those 10 words looped endlessly, each replay sharpening into a blade. I sat in that silence and did what I'd done my whole life. I took inventory. Not of assets, those were gone, but of mistakes. I'd built shopping centers, office towers, an empire worth $50 million. I'd signed contracts, negotiated with mayors, managed hundreds of employees. But I'd failed at the one thing I thought couldn't fail: family. On my shelf was a framed photo of Elaine, my late wife, holding a baby Natalie. Elaine's eyes had that quiet fire I used to depend on. When she got sick, I sold everything to save her: the apartment building, the lake house, the shares in my last development. I told myself I'd rebuild later. But you can't rebuild someone's heartbeat. Elaine died, and with her went the only person who ever understood the cost of my ambition. After she passed, I thought Natalie would be my anchor. Instead, she became my storm. Maybe I overcompensated. Maybe I tried to fill every emotional hole with money, every absence with a gift. That's the irony of success. It tricks you into thinking love can be financed. The night after the dinner, that humiliating dinner, I opened the laptop I'd used to run my empire. The same one that used to calculate profits now displayed my checking balance, 3,214,057. For a man who'd once signed deals in the tens of millions, that number looked almost poetic in its smallness. I stared at it and laughed quietly. Then I whispered to Elaine's photo, "Honey, I think it's time to build again." But this time it wouldn't be buildings or businesses. It would be power, the kind that can't be measured in dollars, but in decisions. That night I began a ritual I hadn't done in years, thinking like a businessman instead of a father. I listed my resources, connections, experience, and memory. I'd lost the trappings of wealth, but not the architecture of strategy. When you've been rich and stripped to nothing, you learn that real power isn't what you own, it's what you know and who owes you. I made coffee, black bitter grounding, and opened the files I'd been saving all these years. Tax records, deeds, payment confirmations, letters of guarantee. I wasn't sure why I'd kept them before. Maybe part of me always knew there'd be a reckoning. Maybe fathers like me never truly stop protecting, we just change how we do it. The more I looked, the clearer it became. I'd built Natalie's world from the ground up. Her education, her wedding, her first home, every milestone of her life was stamped with my signature. And now she wanted to erase the man who'd built it all. I thought of her words again: "We've moved beyond you." It wasn't arrogance, it was amnesia. I leaned back, watching the snowflakes fall through my window, each one landing softly before disappearing into the dark. That's how people forget, slowly, beautifully, until there's nothing left. For a long time, I wanted to forgive her. I told myself she was lost, that Justin's influence had warped her sense of gratitude. But forgiveness without understanding is just surrender in disguise. And I wasn't built to surrender. In the quiet, I could almost hear Elaine's voice. "Alex, don't let them turn your kindness into weakness." She'd said it once after a business partner tried to undercut me. I'd let it go then. But now that memory felt like prophecy. I looked around my apartment, the Murphy bed folded into the wall, the thrift store chair, the stack of bills. Every inch of that space reminded me of humility. And for the first time in years, humility felt like an advantage. You see, rich men can't move quietly, poor men can. When you're invisible, nobody sees you coming. By 2:00 a.m., I'd already begun researching. Public records, mortgage filings, corporate disclosures, all open to anyone who knows where to look. Natalie and Justin's world was made of glass, and I was learning to see the cracks. But it wasn't anger driving me, it was clarity. I realized something simple that night: fathers build homes. Strategists buy them back. I took out a notebook and wrote one line across the top: "If she wants a new narrative, I'll help her write it." That sentence wasn't spite, it was structure. Every empire begins with a blueprint, and this one was no different. For the first time in months, I felt alive. Not vengeful, focused. My heart wasn't beating fast, it was beating steady. That's the rhythm of quiet revenge, slow, deliberate, inevitable. I closed the notebook and whispered again to Elaine's photo. "You once told me every man has two lives, the one he lives and the one he rebuilds. It's time for my second." Outside, the snow kept falling, covering the world in white, as if trying to erase every trace of what came before. But snow melts, and when it does, it reveals everything buried beneath. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I planned, because the difference between grief and strategy is direction, and I finally knew mine. Revenge doesn't start with anger. It starts with observation. That's what I told myself the morning I decided to stop being a father and start being a businessman again. It wasn't about hurting Natalie or punishing Justin. It was about clarity, about balance. When someone takes advantage of your kindness, the smartest thing you can do is make them pay in paperwork. The first step in any plan isn't reaction, it's research. And research was something I'd built my entire life on. Back in my real estate days, I could look at a vacant lot and see its potential profit margin within 5 minutes. I could smell opportunity before others even noticed the dirt. That instinct had never left me. It was just asleep, buried under years of emotional fatigue and misplaced love. But that night, sitting at my old laptop, it woke up. I started with the basics: public records. Natalie Reed Hartman and Justin Hartman, 118 Redwood Lane, Harrison, New York. A house worth $7.2 million purchased in March of 2022. A showpiece marble imported from Italy, a 12-foot chandelier, manicured lawns trimmed by a landscaping crew every Thursday. A symbol of everything they thought they were. I clicked through county databases, scrolled through deeds, liens, and property taxes. Then I saw a foreclosure notice filed September 2023, 3 months behind on mortgage payments. My pulse didn't quicken. I just leaned back in my chair, took a slow sip of coffee, and whispered, "There it is." They weren't rich. They were leveraged. I dug deeper. Mortgage amount 6,847,293.15. Interest rate 7. 2% annually. Lender Heritage First Bank. And then it hit me: Leonard Pierce, an old friend and the current president of that very bank. We'd built 2 shopping centers together back in the 90s. He'd once told me, "Alex, business is just relationships with consequences." I smiled at the memory. The relationship was about to have consequences, indeed. The next morning I called him. "Leonard, it's Alex Reed." There was a pause, then laughter. "My God, Alex, it's been years. What are you up to these days?" "Nothing fancy," I said. "Just watching the world forget who built it. Listen, I need you to look up a mortgage for me. Harrison property owned by Natalie and Justin Hartman." There was silence, then a soft sigh. "Alex, that's your daughter, isn't it?" "Yes," I said calmly, "and I need to know the details." He didn't ask why he'd known me long enough to sense when something serious was unfolding. "Give me a few minutes." When he came back, his tone had changed. "Jesus, Alex, they're in trouble. The property's in foreclosure proceedings. 90 days past due." I felt the corners of my mouth twitch upward, not a smile of joy, but of confirmation. "Leonard, I want to buy that debt. You and I want to purchase the entire loan, every cent." He hesitated. "You're serious?" "Dead serious." "Alex, after Elaine's medical bills, I thought, I'm not broke, Leonard," I said, voice steady. "I'm liquid poor." There's a difference. It was true. When Elaine got sick, I sold everything to save her. But I'd kept one small property. No one cared about an aging strip mall in Yonkers tucked between a pawn shop and a laundromat. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid just enough to keep me breathing. And 6 months ago, Amazon had come knocking, offering $12 million to convert it into a regional distribution hub. I'd signed the term sheet, but I'd never pulled the trigger. I didn't know why then. Now I did. That deal became my war chest. "Leonard," I said, "I'll wire the funds first thing Monday morning. I want every document, every late notice, every missed payment. The moment the wire clears, I want that file on my desk." He paused again. Alex, this is your daughter we're talking about. I know exactly who she is. When I hung up, I sat in silence the same way I used to before sealing a multi-million-dollar contract. That calm before the strike. I wasn't angry. I was awake. By the end of the week, the Amazon sale closed. I walked into Heritage First Bank wearing my old JCPenney suit, pressed modest, deliberate, and handed Leonard a cashier's check for $12.4 million. The moment he confirmed the wire, I became the legal owner of my daughter's debt. Every penny. Do you want to delay the foreclosure? He asked quietly. No, I said. I want it to continue exactly as scheduled, and I want the ownership notice delivered personally, on Christmas Eve. He winced. That's cold, Alex. No, I corrected. That's timing. When I left the bank, the snow had started falling again. The world looked peaceful, pure even. But purity is just camouflage. Beneath that snow were cracks, rot, and everything people like Natalie pretended didn't exist. That night I reviewed the file. Their finances were a mess, overdrawn accounts, $14, $637 in credit card bills from a single month, $1.8 million lost in crypto speculation, and a dwindling hedge fund Justin still claimed was on the rise. Every detail painted the same picture: arrogance, pretending to be stability. Then I found the text messages Leonard had included pulled from their financial monitoring system for high-risk clients. Justin, we need to talk to your dad about money again. My bonus got cut. Natalie, absolutely not. I'd rather lose the house than grovel to him. Justin, the foreclosure notice is real. We have 90 days. Natalie, I'll handle my father. Time to cut him loose anyway. He's an embarrassment. I read those words 3 times, not out of disbelief, but to memorize them, every syllable, every stab. That was when I realized I wasn't chasing revenge anymore. I was chasing accountability. You can't teach humility to people who've never been humbled. But life can. And sometimes life just needs a little push. A push delivered by certified mail with a bank seal. 2 days later at 2:30 p.m., my phone rang. Natalie's voice on the line trembling. Dad, did you do something with our mortgage? A man just came to the house with papers saying, you own our loan now. I didn't answer right away. In negotiation, silence is power. Dad, are you there? I'm here, I said. And yes, I own your debt. Every cent of it. She gasped. You can't be serious. Oh, I'm serious. Merry Christmas, sweetheart. When I hung up, I didn't feel triumph, just equilibrium. The balance sheet of my life was finally leveling out. Because in the end, justice isn't about punishment. It's about math, emotional arithmetic. And I was done letting my daughter live on credit. Some truths don't need to be shouted. They just need to be signed, sealed, and delivered. That Christmas Eve Harrison was glowing like a movie set. Strings of gold lights wrapped every tree, snowflakes drifted like ash over marble driveways, and laughter poured from houses that smelled of cinnamon and pretense. Natalie's mansion stood brightest of all, $7.2 million of glass, concrete, and insecurity. Cars lined the street, Bentleys and Teslas sparkling under the frost. Inside, the party had already begun. Jazz music played softly, glasses clinked, and the illusion of happiness was alive and well. I arrived quietly. No chauffeur, no coat service, no grand entrance. Just an old man in a modest JCPenney suit walking through the door he'd once helped his daughter buy. People didn't notice me at first. They never notice the man who doesn't demand attention. That's the beauty of sovereign silence. When you don't compete for the spotlight, you control the power behind it. I stepped into the foyer. Natalie froze. She was in a silver gown, perfect makeup, her hand clutching a champagne glass a little too tightly. Her husband Justin spotted me next and smiled, the thin, fake kind that businessmen reserve for people who don't matter. Dad, Natalie said, voice trembling. What are you doing here? I looked at her calmly. It's Christmas Eve. You said family means everything. Her friends turned their heads, pretending not to eavesdrop. I saw it in their faces, curiosity mixed with judgment. The kind of people who care more about optics than empathy. Dad, she whispered harshly, this isn't the time? We're hosting? I know, I interrupted gently. And that's why I came. I have a gift for you both. She forced a laugh, trying to keep control. That's not necessary. Oh, it's very necessary, I said, my tone steady, surgical. You see, it's a debt that needed to be repaid. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a manila envelope. The room fell into a hush. The jazz stopped mid-note. People could smell drama the way wolves smell blood. "What is that?" Justin asked, a nervous grin flickering. "Your mortgage," I said. "Or rather, mine." He blinked, confused. "What are you talking about?" "I own this house," I replied. "Every brick, every chandelier, every inch of Italian marble under your feet. I bought your debt 3 weeks ago from Heritage First Bank for $6,847,293.15, paid in full." Natalie laughed too loudly, too desperately. "That's ridiculous. You're bluffing." I handed her the papers. "Merry Christmas." She looked down, her eyes scanning the header assignment of mortgage. "New lender Alexander Reed." Her fingers began to shake. The crowd around us whispered. "Is this some kind of joke?" she snapped. "No," I said, my voice low. "It's the most honest thing I've ever done." Justin stepped forward, anger creeping in. "You can't just, I cut him off, and I did. Because when you borrow against what you can't afford, someone always owns you. I just decided it should be me instead of the bank." Natalie's face drained of color. "Why would you do this? To remind you that respect isn't free," I said. "To remind you that every dollar you used to build this life came from the man you decided was beneath you." The silence was thick. Every pair of eyes in the room was on her. She tried to speak, but her voice cracked. "You're humiliating me." "No," I said quietly. "I'm teaching you. There's a difference." Then I did something I hadn't planned, something purely instinctual. I reached into my pocket again and pulled out my phone. "Before you accuse me of lying," I said, "let's hear the truth from your own mouth." I pressed play. The recording echoed through the room, Natalie's voice mocking sharp. "He still wears that same suit, duct-taped shoes. Every time he opens his mouth, I can smell construction dust." Laughter followed Justin's laughter. "Yeah, your dad's like a walking thrift store ad. Maybe we should set up a GoFundMe for him." The guests stared stunned. Natalie's hand flew to her mouth. The recording continued, every cruel word unraveling their facade. "He embarrasses me, Justin. I wish he'd just disappear." I stopped the recording. The room was so quiet I could hear the soft ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. I looked at her, not with anger, but with finality. "You told me I embarrassed you, Natalie. Tonight I wanted to return the favor in kind, but with class." Tears welled in her eyes. "Dad, please." Justin tried to step forward again, but I raised a hand. "Don't. You've said enough." I placed the documents on the grand piano right next to the glass sculpture she once bragged about buying in Milan. Then I straightened my suit, turned toward the guests, and said calmly, "Enjoy the rest of your evening. The notice of foreclosure will arrive Monday morning." Someone dropped a glass. It shattered like punctuation to the end of an era. As I walked out, snowflakes fell through the open doorway, landing softly on the hardwood floor. Behind me, I heard Natalie sobbing quietly, Justin muttering something about calling his lawyer. But no lawyer could rewrite what had just been witnessed, a father reclaiming his dignity. Outside, the air was sharp clean. I stood at the edge of the driveway, watching the lights flicker through the windows, and I felt peace. Not joy, not triumph, just balance. For the first time in years, the emotional math finally added up. When you lose everything, people assume you've lost your power. But that night I learned something extraordinary. Power isn't about control, it's about clarity. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't seek revenge and rage. I simply told the truth, and truth has its own gravity. It pulls masks off, collapses illusions, and leaves only what's real. That Christmas Eve, the mansion still stood, but the illusion inside it was gone. And as I walked away, my shoes crunching through the snow, I whispered to myself, "You wanted sophisticated people. Natalie. They understand contracts." The wind carried my words into the night, and somewhere behind those walls, I knew she finally understood that silence isn't weakness. It's the sound of someone who's already won. People think revenge ends when the truth comes out. It doesn't. It ends when silence returns and everyone finally understands why it had to be broken. 3 weeks passed after that Christmas Eve, and the world around my daughter began to crumble, not with explosions, but with paperwork, phone calls, and the quiet, humiliating rhythm of consequence. The foreclosure notice arrived on January 2nd, 2024, right on schedule. White envelope, embossed, seal, courier delivery. Natalie must have seen it before sunrise because by 7:00 a.m., my phone was already ringing. I let it ring 8 times before answering. "Dad," she said, voice trembling, "they're saying we have 30 days before the property goes to auction. You can't let this happen. You can't take our home." For a moment, I just listened. Her voice, the same voice that once told me bedtime stories as a child, was now stripped of arrogance. But guilt doesn't always sound like love. It just sounds desperate. "Natalie," I said softly, "I didn't take your home. You gave it away the day you forgot who helped you build it." There was a long silence, then a sob. "Please, Dad, we'll fix this." "Justin is—" I cut her off gently. "Justin is the reason you're in this mess. And you're the reason I learned to stop saving people who enjoy drowning." Then I hung up. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done. Over the next month, the dominoes fell one by one. Justin's firm suspended him pending investigation after internal auditors discovered inconsistencies in client portfolios, rumors of insider trading, leveraged speculation, unpaid loans. Without his job, the family income dropped to zero. The luxury SUV was repossessed within 2 weeks. By the 3rd week, Natalie was selling jewelry online under a fake name, pieces I recognized, gifts from me, each wrapped once in love and now traded for survival. The mansion sold at auction for $4.2 million. The new owners, a hedge fund couple from Connecticut, paid in cash. I didn't bid. I didn't need to. My work was already done. But fate has a way of twisting irony into elegance. A month later, Leonard Pierce called me. "Alex," he said, "we've got a vacant property now that the auction's cleared. If you want, I can help you repurchase it outright. No mortgage, no drama." I hesitated for only a second. "Yes," I said. "Send me the paperwork." 2 weeks later, the title of the Harrison Mansion was back in my name, clean, legal final. The same home that once shut its doors on me now opened them again. When I stepped inside, it was empty echoes of laughter, replaced by the creak of bare floors. The smell of expensive candles lingered faintly, as if the walls were still trying to remember what pretense felt like. I walked through each room slowly. The dining table where Natalie had once whispered, "You embarrass me." The staircase where my grandchildren had laughed. The grand piano where I'd placed the foreclosure papers. Now it all belonged to silence. I didn't redecorate. I didn't celebrate. I left the marble untouched, the chandeliers dimmed. That house wasn't a trophy. It was a lesson carved in architecture. A reminder that when you build your life on borrowed pride, the foundation always collapses. A week later, I heard that Justin had taken a job at a local credit union, making $90,000 a year, a fraction of his old income. Natalie, meanwhile, tried to hold her world together. Her friends disappeared one by one. Charity circles and book clubs suddenly had no space. The same people who once toasted her beauty and grace now scrolled past her posts like she never existed. Their social media accounts went dark, the accounts she'd once used to broadcast perfection. That digital silence was poetic. The empire of filters had fallen. But despite everything, I didn't feel joy. Victory without peace isn't victory, it's noise. And I'd had enough noise to last a lifetime. So I made a decision I would move into the Harrison house for a year, not as revenge, but as closure. I'd strip it of its excess rent-out rooms to veterans, and single parents turn arrogance into purpose. Within months, the neighborhood gossip shifted. "Did you hear the old man who foreclosed on his daughter's mansion is using it as a shelter now?" Good. Let them talk. Let them learn that dignity restored is the quietest revolution. Meanwhile, Natalie wrote me letters, handwritten, trembling ink. At first, they were filled with anger. "You had no right. You ruined our lives." Later, they softened. "I didn't understand. I thought success meant distance. I was wrong. I didn't reply, not yet. Forgiveness isn't a switch. It's a door that opens when both sides stop pushing." Every Sunday morning, I drive past the small apartment complex where she now lived, 2 bedrooms, ground floor, modest. I'd see her walking Lily and Ethan to school, clutching their hands tightly, finally living without staff, drivers, or assistants. Sometimes she looked up and saw my truck passing by. Our eyes would meet. She'd nod once, a silent acknowledgement that she'd begun to understand the lesson no school could teach: love without respect is dependency, not family. The irony wasn't lost on me. The man who was once seen as an embarrassment now owned the very house that embarrassed her. But I never gloated. I simply learned that revenge done right doesn't destroy it, restores equilibrium. By summer, news of Justin's indictment reached the papers. Financial misconduct, falsified records probation. His name was stripped from his firm's website within hours. Natalie filed for separation. I felt nothing but inevitability. One night sitting by the fireplace of the empty mansion, I whispered to Elaine's picture, "It's over." I kept my promise. The snow outside glowed under the streetlight, quiet and endless. In the stillness, I realized something profound. I hadn't just reclaimed property, I'd reclaimed identity. I wasn't the old man who got left behind. I was the architect of consequence, the custodian of truth. And though Natalie had lost her home, she was finally building something real, a sense of humility, of accountability, of self. Sometimes justice looks cruel to outsiders, but real justice doesn't aim to hurt, it aims to heal through contrast. Without loss, no one values what remains. That winter, I stopped being haunted by the question of why she did it. The answer no longer mattered. What mattered was that the cycle had ended, the giving, the taking, the pretending. For the first time in years, I slept soundly. No anger, no plans, no noise. Just peace, the kind that comes when truth has done its job. Forgiveness doesn't always arrive as an apology. Sometimes it shows up quietly, like a meal cooked in the same kitchen where words once broke your heart. It was February 14th, 2024, Valentine's Day, when my phone rang again. The name flashing on the screen made me freeze. Natalie Reed. I hadn't heard her voice since the auction, since the mansion became mine again. For a moment, I thought of letting it ring out, let her words vanish into voicemail like so many of mine had. But something in me whispered, "Answer, just once." "Dad," she said, her voice smaller than I remembered. I need to apologize." The silence between us stretched long enough to remind us both what we'd lost. Then I said softly, "I'm listening." She inhaled shakily. "I was wrong. About you. About Mom. About everything. I let money change what mattered. I thought status would protect me. I thought you were holding me back. But I see now you were the only one holding me up." Her words weren't rehearsed. They were cracked, uneven, heavy with realization. For the first time in years, there was no pretense in her tone, just pain, raw and unfiltered. I didn't speak right away. I let her fill the silence like she used to when she was a little girl explaining a broken vase before I'd even asked. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said finally. I want to start over. Somehow. I want my kids to know their grandfather again, if that's still possible." I looked around the study of the Harrison mansion, the same room where she'd once told me I didn't belong. The leather chair, the cold marble floors, the same fireplace that had seen both her arrogance and my retribution. And in that silence, I felt Elaine beside me again, her voice calm and wise, whispering what she used to say whenever pride tried to steal our peace. "You can win a battle, Alex, but you don't have to burn the bridge to prove you won." So I exhaled long and slow. "You remember what your mother used to say about second chances?" Natalie's voice broke. "No," she said, "they're not given, they're earned." Silence again. Then through her tears, "What would I have to do to earn one?" I leaned back in the chair, staring at the framed photo of Elaine holding baby Natalie on the day she was born. "Come to Sunday dinner," I said finally. "Every week for a year. Bring Lily and Ethan. No excuses, no assistance, no pretense. Cook the meal yourself. Teach your kids what humility tastes like. Do that, and maybe we'll talk about forgiveness." The line went quiet. Then a shaky breath. "Okay, I'll be there." And she was. That Sunday, I stood in the kitchen watching her cook spaghetti and meatballs, the same recipe Elaine used to make. The smell filled the air with something I hadn't felt in years, normalcy. Natalie wore no designer clothes, no diamond earrings, no perfect makeup, just a plain gray sweater, her hair tied back, her eyes red but steady. "Where's the garlic?" she asked. "Second cabinet on the right," I said. For a moment, our hands brushed as she reached for it. She didn't pull away. Neither did I. When Lily and Ethan came running into the kitchen, flour on their hands, I felt something shift inside me. Grandpa Ethan yelled, "Mom says you used to build skyscrapers." I smiled. "Not skyscrapers, kiddo, just homes. But homes are where skyscrapers begin." Natalie froze, spoon in hand, then whispered, "You really haven't changed, have you?" Some things shouldn't, I said quietly. Dinner that night was messy and imperfect meatballs, too salty pasta overcooked, but it was the best meal I'd had in a decade. Not because of flavor, but because of truth. After the kids went to bed, she stayed to clean the dishes. Dad, she said softly, I didn't just lose my house, I lost myself. And I don't know how to be that person again. You start, I said, drying a plate by not pretending to be someone else. For months she kept coming, every Sunday. Sometimes she'd bring dessert from the bakery down the street. Sometimes she'd come empty-handed but full of apology. We never talked about the mansion or the foreclosure again. We didn't have to. The silence between us had changed. It wasn't cold anymore. It was healing. By spring, she'd gotten a job, nothing glamorous, just a community outreach coordinator for a local shelter. Funny enough, one of the programs she worked with was housed in the same mansion she'd once owned. She never mentioned it, but I knew she saw what I'd done there, turned excess into shelter, marble halls into refuge. One afternoon, as we stood in the garden behind the house, she said, "You turned this place into something beautiful again." I smiled faintly. I just cleaned out the lies. The walls did the rest. She nodded slowly, eyes glistening. Mom would be proud of you. I looked at her, then at the sky. Maybe at both of us. Because by then I realized something important. Revenge wasn't the ending. It was the clearing. It burned away everything false, leaving space for something honest to grow. Natalie's humility wasn't forced. It was learned through loss. My forgiveness wasn't weakness. It was the final act of strength. By Christmas 2024, we were sitting together at the same table again. Different house, different circumstances, same family. Lily passed me a handmade card that said, "Merry Christmas, Grandpa. Mommy says you built our real home." I looked at Natalie. She smiled through tears. This time I didn't need a toast or an apology. I just said, "Pass the garlic bread." And that was enough. Because in the end, real reconciliation doesn't happen in grand speeches. It happens in small moments, repeated until they rebuild trust. I didn't erase what happened. I didn't forget her cruelty. But I let time do its quiet work. Some people think revenge and forgiveness can't coexist. They're wrong. Revenge restores balance. Forgiveness restores peace. And when you find both, you stop living in the shadow of what broke you. Now, every Sunday dinner begins with grace and ends with laughter. The past still sits at the table, but it no longer eats first. And that, I've learned, is the truest form of victory. In the end, revenge wasn't my victory. Peace was. That's the truth I came to understand sitting at that same table a year later, the one where Natalie now cooks every Sunday. No marble chandeliers, no designer plates, no guests trying to measure status with wine labels. Just laughter, garlic, and forgiveness hanging in the air. I used to think revenge was about winning back control, proving you were right, showing the world who they'd underestimated. But standing here with my daughter humming in the kitchen and my grandkids chasing each other across the floor, I've learned something deeper. Revenge fixes your pride. Forgiveness fixes your soul. When I lost everything, my business, my wife, my daughter's respect, I thought life had taken my purpose. But it wasn't gone. It was waiting. Sometimes the universe breaks you not to destroy you, but to clear you. It strips away noise so you can hear what truly matters. Natalie and I never spoke about the foreclosure again. We didn't have to. The mansion wasn't just a house, it was a mirror. It showed her what pride looks like when the money runs out. It showed me what silence can do when it's guided by purpose instead of rage. Now, when she thanks me for giving her a second chance, I always tell her the same thing. You didn't get a second chance, Nat. You earned it. And maybe that's the real lesson for anyone still listening. We all have someone who hurt us, a friend who betrayed us, a family member who forgot where they came from. You don't always need to scream or fight or prove them wrong. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is let consequences do the talking. Because silence, when chosen with clarity, isn't weakness, it's strategy. If this story made you feel something, if you've ever been disrespected, overlooked, or underestimated, tell me in the comments. What would you have done if you were in my place? Would you have chosen revenge, or would you have chosen peace? And before you scroll away, hit that subscribe button, because every week we share stories like this, raw, real, and brutally honest tales about family drama, quiet revenge, and the power of justice that heals deeper than hate. Save this video if you've ever had to rebuild yourself in silence. Share it with someone who needs to remember that dignity always has a voice even when it whispers. Because sometimes the best revenge is becoming everything they said you couldn't be.